This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com. Here we go. Let's talk about it. Backlash 05 went down May 1st at the Verizon Wireless Arena in Manchester, New Hampshire, drew 14,000 fans. What a fun show this was 15 years ago. We're coming off of WrestleMania 21. This is a Raw branded pay-per-view. At WrestleMania, we saw Batista win his first world title. Of course, he picked up a win over his mentor and stablemate from Evolution, Triple H. And now here today, it's time for the rematch at Backlash. We're also going to see the return of Hulk Hogan, at least in the ring. He's going to form a dream team of sorts with Shawn Michaels to take on Muhammad Hassan and Daivari. But before we talk about the show itself, let's talk about some news and notes heading into the pay-per-view. Right after WrestleMania in April, WWE has a rash of releases. This is back in 05. You know, I've talked about this with Jim Ross, and WWE was doing the same thing in 2000 and in 2010 and 2015. It feels like April is sort of release month. And I don't know how long that's been the case. When do you remember WWE first adopting we used to hear back in the day that Vince, Bruce, and Pat would book like WrestleMania to WrestleMania. When you get through with that set of stories and it's time to set a new course for the next WrestleMania and develop a new set of stories to get to the next year, that makes sense. If you're going to do what Jim Ross would call a roster purge, what's the thinking, and when did this become part of the process for WWE?
Well, with any corporation, I think every year, every 6 months or so, you have to evaluate your resources and you have to evaluate your entire company. And that's what we did. You have to look at your productivity. You have to look at if there's any dead weight hanging around, or if you need to cut, if you need to bring people on. You don't get any publicity when all that happens. But when you cut, it seems to get a lot of publicity in the negative. So it's just taking a look at your corporation a couple times a year and realizing that you either need some strength over here or you need to eliminate some. So that's all it was.
Wade would write Matt Hardy, Molly Holly, Rhino, Chili.
I told you I just woke up. Sorry.
Jesus Aguilera and Paul Bearer were all released from WWE this week. It wasn't part of a systematic and planned post-WrestleMania house cleaning, as each of the wrestlers whose tenures with WWE ended last week did something to prompt action. Most of them have 90-day no-competes, meaning they cannot work elsewhere until mid-July. Hardy was the biggest surprise of the bunch. Hardy was always on the verge of the chopping block in the eyes of some members of management, but was saved because of his relationship with Lita and the good crowd pops he received. Hardy had been one of the most outspoken WWE wrestlers when the WCW crew arrived. He rubbed the incoming members of WCW management the wrong way, most of whom have since risen to power, including Arn Anderson, Fit Finlay, and especially John Laurinaitis. Hardy gave management who weren't that high on him to begin with, and held a grudge for his anti-WCW stance after the merger, the excuse they were looking for to unload him. While there are some strongly differing opinions, everyone in power felt he didn't have enough main event potential. If they felt they had to choose between Hardy or Edge and Lita, they sided with the latter. Edge, who had heat in the locker room with his colleagues for breaking up Hardy and Lita, now faces increased animosity, since it appears at least that contributed to the departure of Hardy, a fixture of the tag team scene with his brother since the late 90s wrestling boom. So pretty monumental set of releases. No, not talking about Chili Willy, but Matt Hardy. This is something that gets a lot of attention. We've talked about this sort of triangle romance and all the drama and fallout very early in the Something to Wrestle archives, but let's touch on it again here, because this is a new piece of information that I saw in my research, that perhaps he had rubbed some of the WCW guys when they came over the wrong way. And he specifically lists Arn, Finlay, and Laurinaitis. What can you tell us about Matt Hardy and his lack of bedside manner for these WCW guys coming in?
I don't think that had anything to do with it. And I think that is just something that was created out of a narrative for whatever reason. Unfortunately for Matt, the situation took place with Lita and the breakup, and instead of kind of going with it, Matt made an issue out of it pretty much with everybody, and it was unfortunate. So it made it harder to do business. So when you look at it and you've got all these elements, and if you remove one element from the situation becomes better, then unfortunately that's what you have to do. And that, in a nutshell, is pretty much what happened to Matt during that time. I think that he took out his frustrations and his feelings on everybody and everything. Just wasn't a healthy atmosphere.
Lord, I know we're not talking about current stuff here on the show, so I want to make that clear, because that's something we agreed when he went back we weren't going to do. But it's written here that maybe management never saw Hardy as a main event guy. They didn't think that he had main event potential, but they did see that for Edge. And of course we know what Edge went on to accomplish. Whereas Jeff did have some top of the card runs in singles action, that never really happened in the WWE for Matt Hardy. Do you think that was the case his entire run, that for whatever reason, Vince just didn't see him as a main eventer?
Probably so. I think that, if you look at the two, Jeff was a star. Jeff had the charisma. Jeff had that it factor, and Matt was a little bit more of the cerebral of the two. As time went on, I believe that for those that knew Matt and knew both of them early on, you would say that Matt was going to be the star and that Jeff, Jeff will have a decent career. As time went on and Jeff kind of came out of his shell, it became the opposite. But they're both just highly creative, and they're both damn great talents. It was Jeff whose star was shining the brightest at the time, and a little bit harder to find a place for Matt's to shine.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.